All right, we're live. In this video, I'm going to share with you 20 reading mistakes that I've made and how I fixed them. So we're going to do this stream similar to how we did last week's stream. And I think this streaming thing is going to become more of like a weekly thing. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get right into the mistakes that I made. And I have a list here. I'm just going to be going off of just to kind of keep things on track. We're going to be using the dry erase board again. So it was a hit last week. So we're going to be doing it again. So let's go ahead and get into the first mistake. If you're just joining the stream, let me know down in the chat where you're watching from. Appreciate everyone hopping on. And yeah, just introduce yourself. I'd love to interact with you all. But yeah, we'll go ahead and get right into it. And if you have questions along the way, please feel free to drop it in the chat. So this first one here is one that, well, I think everybody kind of struggles with. I've struggled with it a lot. Let me go ahead and just put it up on the screen. And that is passive reading. All right, reading without actively engaging with the material. So for me, I'll tell you, I've struggled with this because I've been reading in the wrong environment sometimes. I mean, there's a lot of different situations, but ultimately the problem is it's like the reason why this is an issue is because you're reading without actual attention and ideas never actually get encoded into your memory. So what that means is like, again, I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence, but whenever you're passive reading, it's not just like laying in your bed and reading 5 pages and like nothing actually being consumed and actually sticking in your memory. It's also the fact that you're reading and you're not like, there's a lot of things like you're not doing anything with the information. You're not taking any notes. And these are some things I'll talk about here later on in the stream. We'll go more in depth on, but passive reading isn't just like, yeah, part of it is just like we've all been there at some point where you just read a few pages and then all of a sudden you just like, what did I even read? You get distracted by your own thoughts. Maybe you're thinking about something that you did earlier that day or something that you have to do later on that day. And that kind of you check out from that. But also passive reading is like you're reading, or it's just like consuming stuff on like consuming YouTube videos, right? You watch a YouTube video, but you don't have to actually do anything with the information. So in order to resolve this passive reading issue, what I did is I had to pause regularly and restate ideas in my own words. So that's like, give you an example. It's like, so I read the book, right? And I talk about my 3-2-1 method all the time. But instead of just reading the book and like just kind of just trying to take with me whatever, and hoping that it would just kind of stay up here, I leaned into what I learned in the book, Make It Stick, which is like lean into active recall. So I write down 3 key ideas in my own words from that chapter. And what that does is that helps active recall scientifically, that it makes knowledge stickier and it makes it more durable. That's the whole testing thing, right? So that's why you take tests in school, because that active recall, it trains your memory and it makes knowledge stickier over the long term. So, just say for like the first problem that I have that resolved my passive reading issue was just like, actively recalling the information in my own words, writing down those 3 key ideas in my own words. And again, we'll go into more like this. The entire stream, it will build onto this, right? Passive reading is just like almost like passive reading is like a big umbrella problem. And a lot of these other specific problems in this video are going to address some of those more specific problems that you may be having. And then they ultimately fall under that passive reading umbrella. So that was the first one. Passive reading. Again, if you're just watching on the stream, what we're doing is I'm covering 20 of the 20 reading mistakes that I've made throughout my, what we'll call this reading career or personal development journey. And yeah, I'd love to know any struggles that you may have with reading. And if you have any questions throughout the stream, please drop them in the chat. Yeah, let's move on to the next mistake. This is a big one. Right. So no clear intent. Starting books without a direction or purpose. I remember watching YouTube videos, trying to just seeing videos out there. It's like how to be successful. And all these YouTubers are like recommending all these different books, whether it's like Rich Dad, Poor Dad or Atomic Habits or all these different books that are like, don't get me wrong, I think a lot of them are really good, but not having a clear intent on what you're like why you're reading that um, means that you're just going to spread your attention across everything instead of focusing on key ideas. So the remedy to that is like to have a clear goal. I picked up the book Atomic Habits because everybody's like, oh, you need to read this book because every successful person has read this book. And it's one of those like I used to think that like if I read the entire reading list that like in the order or whatever that it was in, that it was just going to I would just naturally progress. But we're all individual, like we're all humans and we all have unique characteristics and unique problems. And so the most important thing that I've found is like to have a clear goal and let the books that you read help move you closer towards that goal. That's the thing. It's like because I read the book Atomic Habits, but it didn't really do anything for me because it's like, okay, like of course I have bad habits. We all have bad habits. Of course, I have good habits that I want to sustain, and I understand why. Like I've kind of sustained them over time and where habits come from. But like, how did that help me move closer to my goal at that point in my life? And it really didn't. And so when I had to go back and reread the book at a different point in my life where I'm trying to focus on different things and so not having a clear intent ultimately is just, again, like I said, is going to lead to you just being kind of all over the place. But if you're reading a book to solve a specific problem in your life, or you're researching certain material to solve certain problems or to find key information, it's you having that goal, right? So if you have like it basically have a defined question or an outcome before starting that book, you're going to be much more likely to complete that book and to take most information away from the book because you're reading with intent, right? So having a clear intent is just essential for reading. Again, like I said, I remember and it took me so long to get through that book too because it just like I wasn't reading it for any real reason. I remember recently I got the book Emotional Intelligence. And I it took me so long to read that book because it's like at that point in my life I was just like I want to read this book but there's no real like I need to focus on emotional intelligence right now. Like that wasn't a clear. It's just nice to have information. It didn't fall in line with my goal at that point in time. Like right now, a lot of my goals have just been around like growing this YouTube channel and focusing on better understanding your problems as a viewer and ways that I can create content that's going to be helpful. And so because of that, like I've been trying to read other books that are helping me move closer towards that goal. And reading the book Emotional Intelligence, it's just like it took me forever. So another hack for trying to get through more books is just to make sure that because again, that's where you take the most from the books, right? Because it opens that curiosity that you have for solving that problem and curiosity creates dopamine in the brain. And whenever you have dopamine in the brain, it's going to improve like your motivation and all those again, all those other things that are going to motivate you to want to learn. And it's just going to make it so much easier to make progress that way. So having a clear intent is essential. All right, let's move on to the next question. I was to give you a little bit on like, hey, the dry erase board. I just after last week's stream, I enjoyed it, and I got some pretty good feedback from it as well. So I said, you know what? Let's just keep it rolling with the dry erase board. And again, I'm open to your feedback if you think there's better ways of going about doing this. I still haven't resolved the slide thing. Like my first stream, well, it wasn't the first stream, but like 2 streams ago, I was using Google Slides, and the stream was lagging and everything like that. So I was just said, you know what? Let's just do something simple, and that way I can guarantee that the stream's not going to lag. And so I found this way here to this just like I don't know if I'm putting a band-aid on a more serious problem or what. But again, I'm open to you guys' feedback on ways that we can improve the stream. All right. So moving into not question number 3, mistake number 3. Right. Again, these were probably questions that you all may have. But again, these are some of the mistakes that I've made. And again, I still fall into these sometimes. Again, I'm human. I hope I spelled this right. Yeah. All right. Number 3 is having a distracted reading environment, reading while your attention is split or interrupted. Um, I can almost guarantee there's like if I want to guarantee that I'm not going to finish a book or I'm not going to have a productive reading session, it's most always going to have my phone next to me, right? It wasn't until I stopped reading here in the office and keeping my phone in the other room, or not the other room, but out in the hallway on my little table out in the hallway, that I actually started to make progress with the books that I was reading, because it was like uncontrolled, like compulsively just grabbing my phone and just with no intent to do anything other than just to open my phone and see what I could get into, or a way that I could. I guess I'm probably just chasing some sort of dopamine to try to, whether it's a notification or if it's whatever it is. And ultimately, that really just um, it slows me down. And I still struggle with this to this day, because sometimes I'll come in here and I'll have my phone with me without even thinking about it. And then I'll catch myself and I'm like, crap, I got to put my phone up. Or sometimes I'll have to reevaluate, like, oh, crap, I can't put my phone away right now because I have all this other things going on. So maybe I just need to adjust um, my reading situation. Maybe it's like, hey, I don't read like a physical book here in the office right now. Maybe I just listen to an audiobook as well. I think, and again, I don't want to derail this or go down a rabbit hole too much, but on the days that you have low energy, it's like, hey, and you're like in an environment that's not really conducive to reading a physical book. Um, Listening to an audiobook, it might be the best option for that day. There's no shame in that. Um, I just I've tried all these different things, right? I've tried going to a coffee shop and reading a book in a coffee shop. And let me know down in the chat or down in the comments if you're watching on the replay. If you've ever, you got to be a crazy person to be able to focus in an environment like that. Um, Maybe later on in the day, it's like, I don't know where I'm at. My local Starbucks seems to be always popping, and it's not really. I mean, some people come in there and they work, they have headphones on and stuff, but I have just found that I don't know, those people that can lock in those types of environments are, they're a special breed, but I'm definitely not one that can do that. So trying to optimize your environment um, to where it's going to be conducive to reading and learning and taking away stuff from books, right? Um, Fragmented focus is it's going to prevent deep understanding. And the best thing to do is just to kind of isolate your reading time into like a distraction free block. So maybe that's like 10 minutes or 20 minutes. I mean, in the beginning it might be less than that, and on certain days where your energy levels are low, let's say like for me, I work today and I'm like, I'm doing this stream tonight, I'm like, I'm probably not going to be able to do much reading today. And that's okay. If or probably what I'll end up doing is I'll listen to an audiobook as I'm like winding down for the evening. And having that system put in place, um, for you to be able to still maintain that identity is essential in my opinion, because that's what helps keep that momentum going and everything that you need to just keep the ball rolling. So yeah, try to read an environment that's conducive to, so like eliminate as many distractions as possible, whether that's just like some people, you can listen to music, but I would strongly recommend like some lo-fi, like something with definitely without lyrics, and something that's not going to be really loud or distracting. And then pairing that with something that you enjoy, right? So whether that's getting up in the morning and having some coffee, I enjoy reading a book and having some coffee at the same time. That's they talk about that in Atomic Habits too, right? It's like habit stacking. Two of the things that you or stack, um, you just make it enjoyable. That's one of the key things to making or establishing good habits. And just try to remove the things that are distracting, like your phone, notifications. If you're going to be reading on your phone, maybe put your phone on airplane mode, because if you have the Kindle app on your phone, I get it, but reading on a screen it can be dangerous, just because you're just susceptible to any and all of the distractions that the world throws at us these days. So again, maybe put your phone on airplane mode if that's all that you have. And yeah, again, if you're struggling, another hack that you can have is like if you're struggling with focus and you're in an environment that's not optimal for that, one thing that you can do is like throw your headphones in and listen to the audiobook and read the physical book at the same time. Something about listening to the audiobook and reading the physical book together, it kind of locks in your focus because you're listening to what the reader is saying on the audiobook, and then you're focusing on the words on the page. And that's been proven to be more effective as far as comprehension wise, for you to make things more sticky and for the knowledge to be more long term and durable. So That's just a couple of my thoughts on, ways that I've dealt with dealing with a distracted reading environment. Again, ultimately, I've tried the coffee shop thing, didn't work. And then ultimately what worked for me was just like, hey, putting my phone outside of the office here. And then I just kind of, again, another thing is too that can be distracting is like making sure that the lighting is sufficient or conducive to reading and staying awake, because more times than not, if you're like laying in your bed and it's like really like the lighting is kind of low, like a lamp in there, what's going to happen is you're going to get sleepy, and sleep might be a distraction, right? It can be distracting to have your lights this kind of at that level to where it's like, okay, I'm not going to be, because again, you do the thing that I've done so many times. It's like you're reading and you get 5 pages in and you're like, what in the world did I just read? And you're like, man, it was a friggin' waste of time. And then sometimes you just shut the book completely. A lot of times I just shut the book completely, or you go back 5 pages and you have to read everything over again. And again, that can be frustrating. So just try to be mindful of any and all the distractions, and put yours, have it again, not everybody's going to have an office. Maybe it's like go outside and like in a quiet like place and just be in nature. Maybe it's just reading inside of your vehicle during your lunch break. There's lots of different environments or places that you can find. And another hack is just to like always have a book with you, whether that's on your phone. Again, be careful with the phone thing. But I try to have like a on the go book with me all the time, just because you don't ever really know, those opportunities may pop up sometimes. And again, I'm not saying that you have to be that guy that's like, bring your book. You totally can, and I respect you for it. If you're at like your dentist appointment and you're having to wait for a little bit, or you're at a doctor's appointment and you want to bring your book, hey, that's I wouldn't judge you at all. But because I mean, most people are probably just doom scrolling and watching brain rot on their phone while they're waiting, anyway. So, and if they're judging you for it, again, that's the them problem, not a you problem. So again, not to go on a tangent, but yeah, try to be mindful of your reading environment and try to eliminate as many distractions as possible. That's going to be, that's going to make it just more likely that you're going to learn and take away a lot of the things from the books that you read. Okay. Again, you're watching on the or if you're watching live, let me know that you're hanging out here in the chat. And then if you're watching on the replay, drop replay fam down in the comments. I love to interact with you all. YouTube doesn't have like, I heard a rumor that DMs are about to start coming to YouTube, but which I don't know if that's a good thing or if it's a bad thing, what all is going to entail with that. I mean, I think it's a good thing because I'll be able to interact with you, but it might be a bad thing because I don't know, people might be sending me like hate messages and stuff. And so I have no idea, but again, there's not really that much opportunity to really interact with you all. So interacting here with you in the videos and down in the comments. I read every single one of the comments, and I appreciate all the support that you all have given me. So let's move on. Oh goodness, let me not do that again. Let's move on to the next mistake. That was almost bad. Overemphasis on speed. So prioritizing reading pace over understanding. While I was in the military, I used to talk about this a lot because I used to teach Marine Corps martial arts. And one of the big things was like start off slow and increase speed with proficiency. And so definitely if you're someone and that applies to reading as well. Reading is a skill, and it's something that has to be practiced in order for you to improve at it. And if you're anything like me, whenever I first got into reading, I was like, I read the 4 Hour Work Week, and not that wasn't when I first got back into reading, but when I did read the 4 Hour Work Week, I'm like, man, I gotta get like that book really opened my eyes to like the self-help world. And so I got into all these, like, I want to read all these different books and I want to just read them as fast as I can. So I tried doing the book summary thing. And then I was like, yeah, that's good. But I really like over time, I realized that didn't really do anything for me. Like there was a lot of there's some more nuance there to why it wasn't really helpful to me. But like the summaries thing that was part of it. And then I was like, okay, well, what about this speed reading thing? And I tried some of the speed reading tactics. And that's kind of what got me into it was again, like when I'm talking about the 4 hour work week, I started looking into Tim Ferriss and understanding his philosophy and everything and his approach to life. And, I realized that when I did that, like it, I wasn't the fastest reader. And I tried the whole thing where, and you can do this to this day, but again, like I said, reading is a skill and it's something that I'm just really haven't perfected yet is like reading because the books will give you like a lots of different examples and lots of fluff like uh and really you really have to search for those key ideas and the key information that's there because you probably don't need like the three or four different five different examples that the author's providing. So I've tried doing that to where you like kind of skim and then you sift through and ultimately what I've just found is like um comprehension it drops whenever you rush the process. And so slow down, whenever at a minimum slow down whenever you're encountering those meaningful ideas in the book. I'm not saying that you like that's like you could definitely do that, but I wouldn't try to move too fast before like if you're just getting started. Again, reading is a skill. So I would just start getting the if you haven't built the habit yet or really established the habit yet of being a reader, I would start like again, I talked about this last stream. I would start with audiobooks, move on to audiobooks and then reading the physical book and then starting to read the physical book without the audiobook so that you can kind of develop the habit. And then as you do that, there's I guess I want to say there's levels to reading. You can start to push the envelope a little bit and try to improve your comprehension and speed. I think one of the things that happens naturally as you read more books is you naturally speed up. When you start reading, like you're just getting into reading again. When you start off, it's kind of slow. And depending on the book, it might be really slow or how dense the material is in the book. But the more that you read, the faster you're going to get naturally. It's just going to become natural. And again, you can comprehend things faster visually than you can by listening to it. So, like listening to an audiobook at 2 times speed isn't going to be as fast as you could potentially read from looking at the words on the page and consuming the information that way. So, again, it's not about necessarily the speed because you just know you can try to read faster, but the trade off is comprehension. Right. So if you want to make sure that if you feel like you're having trouble with comprehending books, one thing to try to check yourself on is like, how fast are you trying to read the book? And again, I'll talk more about, there's other reasons why. Sorry. And dog's over here walking around, trying to, I guess, just snuck in here. They're just hanging out in the hallway and they're probably wondering like, what's this crazy guy in here? Who's he talking to this camera? And, anyways, yeah. Yeah, so overemphasis on speed is just again, you just got to check yourself as far as like comprehension and stuff. So slow down, slow down. You don't have to read, you know, a million miles an hour. Again, if what I've learned is that when you're trying to read like really fast like that, there's a lot of you're trying to cut corners. There's some other things that you need to work on as well. So again, slow down when you encounter those meaningful ideas and start off slow and increase speed with proficiency. All right, let's move on to the next mistake. All right. The next one is no cognitive processing. So consuming information without reflecting or recording it. This is like the same thing. I talked a little bit about it earlier. It's the same thing as just passively consuming YouTube videos. Just like you get that dopamine from like watching the video and you're like, oh yeah, but you're not actually doing anything with it, right? Memory requires you to actively process the information and not just expose yourself to it. You have to do something with it, whether it's like writing it down from memory or it's actually going and applying something. And one of the best things that I found is just to like summarize the key ideas using my 3-2-1 method, right? So just three to 5 key ideas. You can do 5. Again, I just say a minimum of 3. But summarizing those key ideas after you read that chapter or whatever section of the book that you're reading, and do it in your own words. And this is going to result in much better like actual understanding. And it's just going to it gets the ball rolling. I say it makes the knowledge at least stick around and stick inside. Again, we talked about active recall. Great book if you want to learn more about like the science behind learning is the book Make It Stick. But yeah, like just they call it mental masturbation, like just watching YouTube videos or just really just reading books and not really doing anything with the information just for the sake of like having that vanity number of I think she's like tearing paper down here right now. Sorry. You don't want to tear the paper. I don't think you want to eat that either. That's gross. Yeah, so just having no cognitive processing is again, that's just a way, like, again, you're read 50 books a year. It's like, okay, what did you do with the 50 books that you read? All right, did you just get that number? Did you just go for the vanity number? Or did you actually process and understand all 50 of those books that you read? So, um, again, this is a big one because there's that thing out there that's like, oh yeah, read 50 books a year and you'll be a genius or you'll be highly successful. It's like, okay, I think there is like everybody's different. Some people learn faster than others, and some. But there's more to that than just read 50 books a year, right? Anybody, if you could read 50 books a year, but I don't know how effective it's going to be, especially if you're just like flying through the books and you're not doing anything with the knowledge. There's still books to this day that I've read that again I've just didn't really process them, and I never made a point to go back and reread, and again, there's more to that than just there's more to reading and learning than just the book number. So moving on to the next mistake. And if you're just joining us on the stream, we're going through 20 of the mistakes that I've made when it comes to reading books and the ways that or how what's worked for me, and hopes that, whatever I share with you can help you as well. All right. The next mistake is to not filter the material. So when you're not filtering the material or engaging, basically what you're doing is you're engaging with books regardless of quality or relevance. So going back to what I was saying earlier about like YouTubers that recommend these books. Some people, maybe a friend recommends this book to you, and you care about this person. You're like, oh yeah, cool. That book that sounds like a good book. But not actually validating or checking the sources, and just like doing your research, right? So, low value input is what is going to crowd out any useful learning, right? So be whenever it comes to reading a book now, whenever someone makes a recommendation to me, I always go and look at the different sources of information about that book, right? And again, you'll find confirmation bias is the thing. You will find if you feel a certain type of way towards a book, you'll find information out there that says that it's good or it says that it is bad. A great place to look at is like Reddit. You can also look at book reviews themselves. You can listen to summaries, and this goes back to the whole thing where I was talking about earlier about selecting goals or selecting books based on your goals. And I don't know what that was about. But selecting books based on your goals is going to be a great filter for, it's a great thing for as far as filtering things out. But the YouTubers that you watch, the people that are recommending these books, they don't necessarily know your unique situation. And so again, it's important to run it through some sort of a filter to make sure it hits all those parameters for what goal you're trying to accomplish. And I'm not saying like to overcomplicate this, like, hey, I have a goal. Let's just give an example of like, I have a goal about like, I'm having trouble with my sleep right now. And again, you might want to consult a doctor, if you're having trouble with your sleep. And again, this isn't medical advice or anything like that, but there's books out there that you can read on ways that you can improve your sleep. Like there's a book called Why We Sleep. And so you could read that book and you could just like, okay, these are the things that I feel like I need to every day when I wake up, I'm always tired. And reading that book, it is something that, well, hey, sleep, in my opinion, is the foundational habit for everything, right? If you can't get your bedtime right, if you can't get the habit of going to bed on time, and trust me, I screw this up from time to time. As soon as I get off from my 9 to 5, I clock into my 5 to 9. I'm right, I'm on the clock right now. So you want to try to get to bed at a normal bedtime. But the reason I'm saying this is because improving your sleep is a goal. Like that's just something that you want to do. So you read books that are going to help you move closer to that towards that goal. And that's one of many different sources, right? You want to filter that though, is you want to look for those sources of information that are actually going to be beneficial. It's like instead of just reading everything that you see online, is to be very careful with that. It's like you want to you know, you want to make sure that you preview those different things before you actually fully commit to the material. So not filtering uh, the material, again, engaging with those low quality books. Um, I say, and to give you an example of like where I've dealt with this, it was just like going back to like reading the book Atomic Habits. Whenever like I had no real reason to read the book Atomic Habits, but I need to read this book because all the successful people say, and you look at the reviews, it's like, oh yeah, this is a great book. But the best thing for me as far as filtering was like just what is your goal for what you're trying to, where are you trying to go right now? And I was just trying to read books for the sake of reading books, and I didn't have a real clear, like I didn't have any clarity on what I was trying to do. So that clarity is a good filter. And again, the first step is just to try to get clarity on where you're trying to go, and then the next step is to filter the material that you're going to read to help you make strides and get make steps closer towards that goal. Okay, moving on to the next mistake. Again, let me know if you have questions down in the chat. If you're watching on the replay, let me know your thoughts. Is there other things that you would like to add, or things that maybe I left out, or things that you go against what the way you see things? I'm open to all kinds of different, like, my opinion is not the end all be all. Like this is just the things that have happened with me, and I'm always trying to learn new skills and new things and new approaches to situations. So I'd love to know the way you've dealt with these types of situations, or you've handled some of these mistakes. This is a big one. Uh, Completion bias, right? So finishing books regardless of the value that you gain from that book. So I've read a good bit of books, and there's been some that, this is something I think gets talked about. It's brought up in school, where you got to finish what you start. Like, don't get me wrong. I think that, you hear that all the time. It's like how you do one thing is how you do everything. So I try to be mindful of this, but this is what I do to combat completion bias is thinking that you need to finish, books regardless of the value that you get from the book, because I got to finish what I start. Um, and basically what happens is your time stays invested and is pretty much just diminishing returns. Like, um, you're investing your time into something where you could be investing it and moving on to other things, right? So to avoid completion bias, what I do is I skim the book. So I skim the chapter titles, and then I skim, like I'll read either the first paragraph or the last paragraph of each chapter. If each chapter has like a summary at the end, what I'll do is I'll just read the summaries of each paragraph, and I'll start to just gauge, like skimming the book allows me to get an idea of the direction this book is trying to go and if it's actually going to be helpful. Now, I've also tried just getting to, like, if by the time I get to page 50, if I'm not getting anything from this book, or if it's just like too much of a struggle to read, um, I'll move on to the next book. And it's okay to quit books that aren't really being helpful. Again, be true to yourself and like what your goals are. Just because you read a book right now and it doesn't help you doesn't mean that you can't reapproach that book later on, right? There's different stages that I've been at in my life where I've read books, and it's like, again, I've went back and tried to read books again, and it was actually something I was able to get through. when you're reading, let's just give an example of this, right? So let's say you want to get into philosophy and you start reading like Stoic philosophy and you read the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. If that's the first book you're starting on and you haven't even developed a reading habit, it's going to be a little bit tough because the vocabulary in there is different from a lot of the vocabulary we use today. So the information is going to be harder to digest, and right now might not be, but right now might not be the right time to read that book. But if you have completion bias, then you're just going to, oh, I'm not moving on to the next book until I finish this one. Okay, that's fine and all, but like you could have just put that book on the shelf for a little while and move to something. Just realize like where you're at this stage in your journey, and it's going to be much. It's going to be you're going to it's going to be an uphill battle. Like, sure, you can do things that way, but completion bias is just really in the past. It's like if it's not something that I'm interested in, I'll just move on, or interest me. And there's too many books out there that are good, that I could just move on and try something different. So, my thing for that is just to like move on. Once you have you either move on once you understand the core ideas, or just move on to a completely different book, right? You don't have to. Nothing says that you have to finish a book either, right? So, like, complete from front to back. Um, Again, I would err on a side of caution of this whenever you're first getting started, but you can just go in and get the information that you need. Again, like I talked about earlier, a lot of the author is going to provide a lot of examples to help get the point across, to drive the point home for the reader. And everybody's different, but you might have gotten it on the first example. And so you understand the man. And so move on to the next, like move past all those examples. Like you can almost be like a surgeon, and you're just going out and you're cutting out the most essential information. That's going to help you get through books a lot faster. Um, and you don't have to like in the book, How to Read a Book, whenever I was reading it, like there's a section in here that talks about like how to read poetry, I think. And I didn't need it. Like I'm not reading any poetry right now. If I want to go back to that, I mean I can. Uh yeah, so they talks about, there's a section here, how to read philosophy, definitely read that. There's like how to read social science. Um where's the spot in here? No, it wasn't how to read. Maybe it was. Yeah, how to read imaginative literature. It wasn't, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. There's a section here too. Like suggestions for reading stories, plays, and poems. The imaginative literature and reading stories, plays, and poems. Hey, I just bypassed that for now. Like that was, 199, 222. So that was like what, 23 pages of the book that I didn't necessarily need to read. Um, there's other thing that I did read, like how to read history, how to read philosophy. Those are the things that, and then again, going through the book. But again, if you are just getting into reading, there, like going back to what I was saying as far as like completion bias, quit more books than you start, because like read what's going to keep you interested. You don't have to finish the book just because you started it. And then the other piece of that is like, once you again be mindful of this, and this is why I say is err on the side of caution as a beginner, is because as you're reading a book, you might not know all the key information. And so I think it's good to get that sense of completion, or make a sense of progress, like you're reading books. But also just be to play devil's advocate, is to be mindful that like you can get that illusion of learning too. Like, maybe that illusion of progress because you're just being a surgeon. And I like, again, these are things like I'm going to talk about it more in this video, but like we're kind of building here or onto this, like, right. So the other ones earlier we talked about, it was more like execution. This is more like structure, like, and then and here in a bit, we're going to talk about like thinking quality, um, and how understanding breaks down. So, again, completion bias, you can be a surgeon, but also it's like you don't have to finish all the books that you read. You can try other books and move on, come back to other books. Just because you start something doesn't mean you have, just because you start a book doesn't mean that you have to finish the book. All right. I think I beat that one up enough. Let's move on to the next mistake. Emmy is back in here, you all. Now, this dog is not my dog. My mom's out of town right now, so I'm watching her dog. And so she's kind of like all kinds of out of whack right now. My mom's on vacation, and Emmy's just here hanging out. And my other dog, Cole, he was in here a few streams ago, and they just don't know what to do. They're just kind of standing around. They're probably like, why is this guy in here talking so loud? Or what in the world is he in here talking about? Anyways, going on a tangent. Let's move on to the next mistake. All right. Scattered reading focus. So dividing attention across multiple books at once. Now, there will be some that watch this and will be like, yeah, it's called interleaving. You can do that. That's actually good for learning. Um, but I'm just going to push back on that for anyone that's getting started because that can be overwhelming. Just because it works for learning doesn't mean that it's like the human nature is not going to go fight against that, right? And so the reason is like no sustained depth leads to it's going to lead to weaker retention. So if you're trying to read a bunch of different books, and especially if you're just getting started, it's going to be much harder to really get the depth of the knowledge that, if you're reading about sleep today and then tomorrow you're reading about habits and then after that you're reading a biography about Steve Jobs, like, okay. There's just too much going on there for someone that's like just getting back into reading. And so I think you're much better at this point in the journey if you're just getting started. And this is for me, I'll tell you, like I was trying to read the book Make It Stick. I was reading Mindset, which there is some crossover there. But I was reading Mindset, I was reading Make It Stick, I was reading the 12-week year. And so I was reading those books. And then I was also trying to get into the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And so like these were like 4 books. I'm like, yeah, I just need to get a little bit and I'll just do a little bit at a time. And ultimately at the end of all that, I did like what happened was because I wasn't processing the information properly. I was just like, this is a lot of stuff. And by the time I would come back to other books, I kind of the forgetting curve had happened, right? I dumped everything that I'd read before. And it just I wasn't really making any progress. So the best thing that I found is just start off when you're first getting started, is just to read like one book, just one book. Pick what it's going to be. Start with stop eating the paper. We don't want to eat the paper. I have some mail on the floor down here, and she's just trying to tear it up. Um, but start with just one book, and from there, then you can kind of build up from that. But starting with one book is going to allow you to go deep with that material, and you're not going to have a whole bunch of distractions. Or you're not going to basically you're not going to have too much up here in your head. I would say not necessarily distractions because I don't want to necessarily look at them as that. But you're not going to have too much going on in your head because it's a lot. When you're trying to get momentum, when you're trying to build the habit, not only in the background, you're not just learning the new material, but you're also trying to build those neural pathways that make the reading habit itself. So again, start with just one book, and trying to divide that across multiple books is just going to be a lot. And so just focus on one primary book at a time. Now, you could try. You're probably already going to be consuming other things anyway, so it's important to try to just minimize the amount of information that's coming in, especially early on. Okay, let's move on. Let's see. Man, we're already at 45 minutes, man. I'm surprised. It feels like time has flown here. So that was scattered reading focus. Now let's move on to the next. No reinforcement cycle. So reading as a one-time pass through information. So you like read and then you don't do anything with it. And without reinforcement, forgetting is going to be pretty much inevitable. Um, so like you need some way of like it just this is the same thing like in school whenever you study. Like when you're reading books, it's very similar in a sense that it's like you don't want to cram it, but you need to revisit the information. And so one way that you can do this that I found is really easy is to just test yourself on the material that you read. Well, how can you test yourself? Well, you can test yourself by just reading a chapter, closing the book, and then go doing my 3-2-1 method, where it's three key ideas, two questions that you have, and one thing you're going to take action on the next 24 to 48 hours. But really just having those three key ideas because we're recalling from memory, and that's strengthening the knowledge because active recall is a way that we strengthen memory. And so when you close the book, that's a form of testing yourself. But let's go a step further, right? So now you have all those key ideas. Let's say you finish the book. Well, one thing that you can do, and this is like reinforcing, this is a reinforcement cycle, is like just use Anki or use ChatGPT to create a test for you. And you can do that like for anything. You can give it your notes and have it quiz you on that. You can take a picture of your notes in your notebook and have it create something based off of that. So that's the reinforcement cycle. So and you want to revisit those key ideas after somewhat soon, right? Usually it's like 24 hours. I'll go back and kind of revisit my ideas, especially before that naturally happens because I'll be like, okay, before I get started on this next part of the book, let me look at what I just wrote down last night. And then that kind of gives me an idea because those key ideas, I've kind of summarized them in my own words. And so that kind of primes me to move forward in the book. So that's a reinforcement cycle in and of itself, but it's having some way of like revisiting those key ideas. All right, moving on to the next mistake. All right, and if you're just joining us on the stream, what we're doing is we're going through 20 of the mistakes that I've made as a reader and how I fixed them. Again, we've covered a lot of ground, and I forgot to mention this early on in the stream, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to chapter this video out, so you can go back and watch these different parts of the video that may be relevant for your specific situation that you're dealing with right now, and hopefully this is helpful. Again, if you're watching on the replay, I'd love or you're watching live, or if you're watching on the replay, I'd love to know any of the feedback that you all have, anything that you feel like should be expanded upon, or share your specific story. I'd love to hear it and ways that you've kind of overcome some of these mistakes. But moving on to the next one. All right, and that is lack of reflection time. So moving on from reading without thinking it through. Um, so before, what I would do is I would just like it was the vanity game. I wanted to read as many books as quickly as possible, and what I found myself doing was a lot of times I'd get done with a book, and then I'd be like, okay, time to start the next book, and so finish reading Atomic Habits. Now it's time to read the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and by doing that, what happened was I didn't really take any time to reflect, right? So, um, and basically, I just had a surface level understanding of the book. And so, what I, sorry, that was embarrassing. Just voice just kind of like dried out. Um, so what I found is like the best thing to do is to just pause after that book, right? Take 24 to 48 hours after you finish a book and just reflect on what you've read. A good way of doing this too, is you can do it one or two ways. You know, a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, write essays. That's really helpful." And sure, if you want to write an essay, you totally can. But a lot of people are repulsed by what you want me to write an essay. One thing that you can do is just like I'm reading the Bible right now, and as I'm finishing a book, what I'm doing is I'm like in a Google Doc. I'm just speech to text, bullet points, everything that I remember from that book. And sorry, I'm just making sure she's not chewing anything important down here that's not paper, like wires or tripods and all of those things. So, um, yeah, it's like taking some time. Like you can do that. That's a great way of like just thinking about the knowledge and just kind of instead of just going jumping from one book to the next. Because when you jump from one book to the next, you're not gonna really. I'm telling you, it's like you'll see really quickly. Like you'll finish that next book and you'll be like, what did I even talk like learn from the book I read previous to this one? And so taking about I've found that pausing, 24 to 48 hours and taking some time to whether write it out, speak it out, make a video about it. Like you can do like a voice memo. You just record yourself on your phone talking. Like it just is good to like talk it out. And sorry guys. It's just good to kind of talk about it or just kind of think and just like talk through your thoughts. And that's going to be much more powerful and much more effective for you as far as retaining the information and then building on that information later on. So, lack of reflection time was a big one for me because I just went from one book to the next. Come here, girl. I see what she's got now. She's got a box. She found a cardboard box. All right, let's move on to the next mistake. You guys didn't know you were getting any dog entertainment whenever you watched the stream, and again, she's just a puppy too, so she's like into everything. I could put her out there in the hallway and close the door, but I guarantee she's just going to sit out there and probably whine and want me to come open the door. So this is and this is way better than just them like sitting in their kennels. And so we're just, again, I apologize for any interruptions during this stream. All right, moving on to the next mistake. You got to stop eating everything in here. You think like when you chew on paper, it's not going to be, it's not going to taste good. Hey girl, just leave it be. You don't have to eat that. Just leave it. All right. Next mistake. I think I spelled that right. Unquestioned acceptance. All right. So absorbing ideas without evaluation, right? So when you don't engage with the book, it typically leads to more shallow comprehension. And so what I do is I'm reading, like I try to mentally test the ideas as I read. So like I try to do like when I'm reading something, I will like it's almost like a conversation. And I'm like, I don't just everything that I read, authors are humans and we're always making new discoveries every single day. If I'm reading some of the classics, like if you read from some of the philosophers and not knowing what some of the discoveries that we made to this day and you just accept everything for what it is, well, you're just going to have like shallow comprehension. Like, I already said that, but like you're going to have you're just going to take everything for what it is and it's really not going to develop deeper knowledge. I mean, you might again. So again, look at it with like you want to test these things as you're like run it through some sort of a filter. It's like, okay, this like how does this relate to something I know? Like, is this something that actually again, we'll talk more about this here in just a second, but like run it through some sort of filter and look at it with a level of scrutiny because authors are human beings and sometimes they've like just because they have just because they've written, and again, I'm going to say this very boldly, but just because they've written a best-selling book does not always mean that everything in the book is factual. And so you want to look at it with a level of scrutiny. So again, so that you to challenge every author, right? The burden of the author is to get you as the reader to understand their point of view, their problems that they're presenting, and then the solutions that they're offering. And again, it's you as a reader, you should challenge the author to make it more of a conversation. You're going to get more out of the book that way. And it's going to help you get a better understanding of like, well, the POV of the author and that specific subject, like where these different sources of information are coming from. And so you can draw your own conclusions. Um, Again, we want to be, I like to be a participant in like the study or the presentation that's or what's being presented to me as the reader. And because if I something that I'm trying to study, again, I try, get down to, first principles, like asking why and, what is this book about? Why is it, what are the problems? What are the solutions that the author's offering? And why does it matter? Again, so for, I did question these, or I'm sorry, I did not question these things whenever I was first reading. I was like, oh yeah, I'm reading books, man. These guys are authors and all this stuff. And then I started to find conflicting ideas in certain books. Like this author says that this, they reference the scientific study, and then this author says the opposite, and they reference the scientific study is to reinforce both sides. And it's like, well, which one is right? And the answer is like they're both kind of right. And so it's like, where can we find the middle? And that's where usually you'll find there's still more information to be learned in certain topics, and then you can try to do that research on your own, and there's still more discoveries to be made. So again, don't take everything, you know, it, you want to try to evaluate all the ideas, run it through some sort of a filter, and do your own research, right? And this comes with, and I'm saying this from a sense of like, this is just be mindful of what the information, again, I don't think where we're at in the world right now, I don't think people have ever been, I mean, we're more skeptical than ever. And so sustain that with the books that you read too. And again, don't just assume everything that you're reading is right. All right, moving on to the next mistake. All right. No personal anchoring. So learning ideas without connecting them to experience, right? One hack that I figured out, um, as I was, and I'll talk about uh, like notes a little bit here in a bit. And I'm just making sure. Yeah, I'll talk. I don't think I'm going to I think I took that part out, just because you guys don't really care much about note taking from just the polls that I've done and the feedback that I've gotten from you all. So I think I took that out. But again, just talking about like, so no personal anchoring. I will touch on this because it's important for like when you're taking notes and stuff, or even after you're reading, right? So when you're reading a book, what I realized is that when I started to relate it to things that I've experienced in my life, like starting to think about things from my childhood, why I do things the way that I do them, um, it just made it so much easier to understand. So, just because disconnected information is harder to retain, right? So if you don't connect it to something that you already know or you've already kind of experienced, it's going to be harder to retain long term. And again, this is something that goes into elaboration whenever you are like just relating these concepts to real situations or examples and things that happen in your life. And it just makes it like you'll lean into that, right? So whenever it just basically you took that idea and you connected it. This is just in my imagination, what I envision it looking like with your neural pathways, right? So you have your neural pathways and you took this idea and it just kind of attached to this like big tree, fractal of a neural pathway. And it's just kind of there. And so when you attach it to that, when you relate it to things, it makes it much easier to understand and it makes the knowledge stickier. So this was a huge hack for me. So what I try to do a lot of things is like, to better understand things is like I try to connect it to something that I've experienced or something that I already understand, some knowledge that I already have. And by doing this, it just makes it, I don't know, man, it's just like so much easier to understand. And this is another hack, going back to the last point, like, or the unquestioned acceptance and no personal anchoring. These two go hand in hand because this is where you go from just being an elementary level reader, in elementary level meaning not to insult anyone by their like it doesn't mean that you read like a child. It means that elementary level reading is just it's in the book or in this book right here, How to Read a Book. This is where the author what categorizes is like this is all of us. If you have up to if you've made it through elementary school, middle school, and high school, or even just you drop out of high school, you still have this too. It's like basically the basic level of reading is elementary level of reading. That's just where you're decoding words on a page. But if you want to be an analytical reader, which is usually not really taught until most people get like a master's or a doctorate, um, well, that's whenever you start engaging with the books, right? So unquestioned acceptance just means like you argue with the author, you write your counter arguments in the in the margins, or you like, or any questions that you have for later on in the book. And then also as you're taking notes, or if you're writing things, you can write these in the books too, is like uh things that are how these ideas connect to certain things that you already know or you've experienced personally. And this goes from reading the book by just decoding words to looking and like exploring the book. And I call it like you're going on an adventure as you read this book. And that really changed things for me, because originally it was like I was taught like you need to read the book, highlight the things that sound important, and then go back and reread the highlighted section so you don't have to read the whole book. And that just wasn't very enjoyable to me, I'll be honest with you. But when I discovered this, like from this book, I was like, man, like now it's not like I am going in with a list of questions. Like, so what is this book about? What is the author? What is the problems that the author is presenting? What are the solutions that the author is presenting, and why does it matter? Um, and so when I did that, it's like what now it's like I'm trying to constantly answer those questions. And I'm constantly also trying to relate these key ideas to certain things that I've experienced in my own life, and try to relate it to knowledge that I already have. So, like, for example, when I'm reading the book Mindset by Carol Dweck and I'm reading Make It Stick, well, I realized that growth mindset is important for someone to have versus instead of a fixed mindset, because when you have a growth mindset, you look at everything in life as kind of like a skill to be developed. When you have a fixed mindset, you look at failure as character defining, and that uh, a better way to describe it is like when you fail and you have the fixed mindset, that defines you. When you have a growth mindset, though, it's just feedback, and just it just gives you the feedback that you need on ways that you can improve. So so what I did is like those there was a crossover there, right? So I understand that like whenever you're learning, if you're struggling to understand something, well, it's not necessarily doesn't mean that you individually have these fixed traits. It means that you just have to work at it, right? So if I'm building a reading habit, it's like reading is a skill. And there's even crossover with that in the book How to Read a Book. It is a skill. It talks about this like skiing. When you try to focus on all these different things, you have to take it one rung at a time when it comes to the ladder, right? And so all these are overlapping ideas. Sorry, whoops. All these ideas kind of overlap, and they've all connected to each other. And I just literally did that right there, where um, the book Make It Stick talks about like the students that were more receptive to learning were those who had the growth mindset, and like they were more willing to take tests. The ones that were had the fixed mindset were not willing to take tests, and they didn't enjoy taking tests. And it also said that students in general resisted taking tests because, well, it's just not fun to have your like. There's a to put forth all that effort again. That's why we don't like taking tests in general, right? Because there's usually if you don't pass the test, there's something bad that usually happens, right? You make a bad grade that affects your GPA and all those things. But anyways, um, but this is us in the like this is a real world. We're not talking about school here. Like, sure, you can apply this to school here, but we're talking about like doing your own self education and whether and through reading books. And so, relating, I've just found that whenever you question the author and you have a conversation with the author and you tie things to personal experiences, I found that the knowledge is much more sticky, and it's because you're just connecting it to things that you already understand, and you're just building out that knowledge base. So, all right, I think I talked enough about those, beat those up enough. I think you guys get the point. Let's move on to the next mistake. All right, we've made it to 1 hour, guys. If you're just now joining us on the stream, talking about 20 mistakes that I've made as a reader, and there's probably more that I've made, but these were just like ones that I felt like were worth sharing. And I hope that something in here can help you all, like as far as like experiences that you've had. And um, again, there's a lot of information out there, but I just wanted to try to make this stream to kind of like a one-stop shop. And so um, I have other videos addressing some of these problems specifically here on the YouTube channel. But I'm going to chapter this out after the stream. If you're watching on the replay, most likely I've already done that. So you can click around and bounce around to various different topics and find what's going to be will serve your specific needs, or I don't know if I said that right, but it will just be helpful to you. Maybe it just made that sound more dramatic than it should have, but yeah, click around, watch the parts that are helpful to you. Okay, let's move on to the next point. Mistake number 13. Lack of critical comparison. So this is treating all information as equally valid. Well, no filtering reduces depth of understanding, right? So what you want to do is you want to compare ideas to what you already know. And I beat this one up good, so I won't spend too much time here. Again, that was kind of like the personal anchoring; those go kind of hand in hand. But again, I wasn't the reason. This kind of elaboration, kind of it talks about this in the book, Make It Stick. So there's like science that backs this up. When you elaborate on things in your own words and tie them to things that are that you already understand, or you already know, it's gonna excuse me, it's gonna make the knowledge much stickier. And so again, what you want to do is, I've already kind of talked about this, so I won't beat it up anymore. It's just because it kind of bled over into this specific mistake here, but just try to. So let's just so that we have it all here. When you're because we're kind of building on all of these, right? So it's like, don't accept everything that you read, right? So argue, like have some pushback to what the author's having to say. Um, Anchor it to something personally, right? Something that you've a personal experience that you had, if it applies, and then compare it, or just well, not really compare it, but like um, I guess it is compare, where you just take that information and relate it to something you already know, or just kind of build on to something that you already know, compare it to that. And then, yeah, that was number 13. That one was pretty quick. We'll move to number 14. Because it was kind of quick, but that's probably why the last tangent I just went on for as long as it did. Do you guys like the dry erase board thing? I don't mind it. I could do the whole thing where you have like a dry erase board in the background, but I don't know. I feel like that's just a lot for a live stream. I'm gonna be standing up the whole time because I don't want to sit down. I mean, I guess I could get like a mobile dry erase board and kind of have it up here and just like on wheels. I could probably do that, or like one of those little easels. I don't know. You guys let me know down in the comments, or here on the chat. You can let me know. But yeah, just trying to think of ways to improve the stream. I don't know if slides are going to be the best move. Maybe they are the best move. And you say, dude, just bring back the slides, like the dry erase board. It's aggravating. I don't know. You tell me. All right. This is a big one right here. Honestly, it's one of the best, some of the best medicine. This was really big me. Knowledge without application. So accumulating ideas without using them. And one quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson that kind of says this beautifully is like, an ounce of action is worth a ton of theory, right? So everything that you read, right, unused information is going to fade quickly. So everything that you keep up here is just theory. And so what I was talking about earlier, I was talking about my 3-2-1 method, right? So 3 key ideas, 2 questions that you have. The 2 questions apply to like going in your notes and having a conversation with the reader, or not the reader, the author. You as the reader have the questions, and then one thing that you will apply in the next 24 to 48 hours. Well, the reason why is because active recall is what makes knowledge sticky. And whenever you take one thing that you're going to apply, you're recalling what that was, that from that information you just read from the chapter. And then the other thing is like, you're going to go out into the real world and you're going to apply this thing whatever way, whether it's I don't know, it's something like a communication skill, or if it's a specific habit that you're trying to build, or it's a specific um, routine that you're trying to do. Like, the routine habit, all that stuff. You're just going to take that one thing and you're going to apply it and you're going to get real world feedback, right? There's going to be a cause and you are the cause, and then there's going to be an effect to the cause. And that's going to give you um that outcome is going to be the feedback that you need to will give you some like to make improvements, right? So it's the whole feedback loop concept where and that's the reason why this is important because you wrote down the thing that you're going to do. So that's a form of active recall. And then you go out in the real world and then you do it. And you not only recall the information that from the book and then you apply it in your life, but now you've had an experience with that specific thing and there was an outcome that occurred. And when that outcome occurred, now you have something to reflect on. Okay, I learned this from the book. I tried this and now I'm reflecting. So I'm doing another form of active recall. I'm reflecting on the experience itself, whether it was positive or if it was negative. And that is going to be, that's why they say, again, that's why Ralph Waldo Emerson says an ounce of uh, action is worth a ton of theory because it's so powerful. One of the things that will move the needle more than anything, and you hear this all the time now, is like, just take action on the things that you learn. Just do it, right? You don't learn how to hit a baseball by reading a book. You learn by going out there and swinging and missing and swinging and missing. And then eventually you learn how to hit the ball. And so again, you have to practice. You have to practice, and that's the most important thing. It's like, I don't want to insult your intelligence, but for me, whenever I was first learning, like applying things is so important, and it's that illusion of learning is like whenever you're reading these books, but you're not actually applying the things that you learn. You're not doing anything with the information, and ultimately, what that's going to lead to is just like stuff sitting up here, but it's going to come in, it's going to stick around for a little while, and it's going to go out the other side. It's going to be gone. It's not going to hang out for a long time if you're not actually using it. The whole thing, you don't use it, you lose it type of thing. Again, unless you're making something like a habit, that's what you're doing. Again, you're strengthening those neural pathways whenever you do those things, you take action. So knowledge without application was a huge one for me. There's so many books that I've read. I was listening to audiobooks. I can like a handful of audiobooks that I've listened to, done nothing with. And yeah, I'm sorry. Amy's like over here, and I'm not sure what she's trying to do. She's just kind of looking at me. Um, yeah, there's a handful of books that I've listened to and just done nothing with, and I can't really remember any of them. I mean, I could go back and listen to them, and I'll probably recall some of it as I'm listening to it, but I couldn't tell you anything off the top of my head right now for certain books that I've listened to. So again, knowledge without application, just apply one idea as soon as you can. 24 to 48 hours, apply something, and you'll be much better off. And so let's move on to the next mistake. If you're just now joining us on the stream, we're hitting the top 20 mistakes that I've made as a reader, and hopes that maybe some of these mistakes that I've made, you can learn from them, learn the lesson without the scar. I think that's what they say. You learn the lesson, but you don't get the scar. Again, this is like, that sounds way too serious for what we're doing here, but I hope that some of the things that I talk about in this video can help somebody move past a certain issue that they're having in their reading journey at the moment. So let's move on to the next one. I could riff on this one for a while. Skipping complexity, right? Moving past difficult sections instead of engaging with them. This is because core ideas are often in the most challenging parts. So for me, what this looked like, this looks like I've done it in various different ways. Like I've kind of put certain sections of a book, like skipped over that and be like, oh yeah, I'll go back to that section later because it's really dense and I don't want to lose my momentum. And then really not ever I've went back to it. Or there's been times where I haven't gone back to it and just kind of put it off and just ultimately didn't even finish the book. But then there's other times where I went back to it and I'm like, oh, I'm pretty much done with the book. Like I'm not going to spend any time on this. And I'm really I sold myself short by doing that because I didn't put it in the time and energy needed, and it was essential information. Now, another thing that seems to be a common problem amongst just what people are saying online is that how people are outsourcing all their knowledge to AI. And well, I've made videos in the past where I've talked about like, hey, yeah, you can take a section, you can use like Google AI Studio, and you can read the book on your computer, and you can highlight a certain section of that book. Like specifically, I was reading the Discourses of Epictetus, and yeah, like there's certain sections in there that I don't understand, and so like I have the book explain it to me at the ninth grade reading level. Now, if that's the first and only time that you're going to go through that book, it's not going to. What I'm saying is that there's value in wrestling with the information and not just immediately defaulting to AI to solve all your problems. Um, but then there's also times where it is valuable. If you're going to go back, you're going to be diligent. You're going to, it's, you know, the biggest thing is just to not to, don't try to cheat, or I guess cheat is the right word, right? That's what they would say in school, but don't try to cheat yourself of the information just because it seems take the path of least resistance, right? Slow down instead of avoiding confusion, and spend some time, use some context clues, and really think about it. And even if it's like, sometimes a lot of the time the burden of the that the author has too with the reader is that they have to communicate to you. And this is, they talk about this in the book How to Read a Book. The burden of the author is like they have to say things in a way, it's communication. And if you don't have the vocabulary that the author is using, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to understand what the author is trying to communicate to you as the reader. And so it might not be the your favorite thing to do, or the most like, this is why people use dictionaries for like when they're doing like whether they're reading certain books. And like, again, I'm not trying to be old school here, but like there is value in just using a dictionary to figure out the definition of a word over just completely outsourcing your thinking to AI. Because, well, if you're not using your brain, again, it's like a calculator, right? If you do basic math on a calculator, it's eventually, and you don't really do the basic math in your head, like you'll lose that skill set. And so skipping the complexity is just selling yourself short. So again, you don't want to cheat yourself. Again, I've done this with AI. I've but now I realize that a little bit of effort goes a long ways. And so yeah, skipping the complexity part is a big one for me, because I was thinking for a while that like, hey, AI is going to be, it's the next revolution. Like instead of reading this book, I'll just throw the PDF version of the book inside of I have it right here. Yeah, Notebook LM. Just throw it inside of Notebook LM and then just have it spit out a summary, and then I won't have to read the book. And yeah, ultimately that doesn't really, it's not you're much better off if like you're going to do that, be that surgeon like I talked about earlier in the stream. Like go in, find the key ideas. You don't have to read all the examples, cut through the fluff, and then yeah, do it that way versus it requires a little bit of effort. So skipping the complexity, that was one of the things that I tried to avoid. And ultimately it just, I'm not saying that you have to make it harder than it has to be. And that we shouldn't be progressing and trying to just streamline these different processes. But I've just found that whenever skipping complexity, sometimes that effort is the effort necessary to build long-term durable knowledge, right? It might not feel fun to take the test. What are you doing, Amy? I just see your hair over here. She's a golden doodle for any of you that are curious, and she's just curious about what's going on in here. She doesn't even know what a live stream is. All she sees is this guy in here talking to this whatever this thing is sitting on top of a tripod. Anyways, yeah, so skipping complexity is important. I've talked about that to the point where I feel like you guys understand. So yeah, if you're just joining me on the stream, let me know you're here down in the chat. If you're watching on the replay, let me know down in the comments where you're watching from. What are some of the mistakes that you all have with reading, or that you've made when it comes to reading? Again, some of them I could be making right now and I don't even realize it. Again, I'm human and I still make mistakes. And I'm still learning every single day. So we'll move on to the next one. Skipping complexity. Yeah, just slow down instead of avoiding the confusion. Because again, when you wrestle with that stuff, it's a lot of times it's a lot more productive than it feels. Oh yeah. I think I spelled that right. Motivation based consistency. Reading only when when energy or motivation is high. This is a real struggle in the beginning when you're building a reading habit. I mean, I say that now, like, I wouldn't consider myself a beginner at this point just because I've been reading books for a while in my adult life. Um, you know, it's just like in Atomic Habits, it talks about the compounding effect, and in inconsistency interrupts that compounding effect, right? Those atomic habits being those like little small things that lead to those exponential results. Um, and so it's not about motivation. You know, the whole saying that I used to tell my Marines this, and it's cliche as crap now, but motivation will fail you, discipline will not. And really, I talked about goals earlier. It's important to have goals, but it's also what's going to keep you showing up is having a system in place, right? So, I have lots of systems that I cover here on this channel for different specific problems that you may be having as a reader. So I encourage you to go and watch, check out, like click around, that you can just see what videos are there. And because there's a lot of systems that I have for various different parts of the reading process, whether that's like building a reading habit, reading comprehension, um, like actually applying things that you learn, or like just ways of taking notes. It's like you name it. There's I have various different systems on the channel for diving into, like, basically just giving you a template and you kind of modifying it to match your lifestyle. But having a system is really going to be what keeps you showing up, right? Because you don't even have to think. You don't have to worry about motivation or any of that stuff. You just have to follow the instructions on the instruction manual, because you've kind of given yourself some guidelines as to like where you're going to fall. And so what this means is like finding a system that works with your brain, not against it, right? So if you're being this like rigid, super disciplined, like, hey, every time I read, I gotta take notes. I got to make sure that I am reading for at least 30 minutes. I gotta be making this much progress in the book. And you being super rigid like that is going to create a whole bunch of pressure for yourself. And when you put a whole bunch of pressure on yourself, that's going to encourage that negative self talk. And so ultimately, what I found works best is just to have a system for and I'll give you one here that's just like it's a simple kind of mental model to have. And hopefully maybe it'll help you. But for me, on the days like where I don't have a lot of energy, like I've been working hard, my cognitive load has just been like I'm just done. Um, I try to just do 2%, 2%. And so what I mean by 2% is like 2% of that specific thing, or 3% or like of that reading habit. What am I trying to do? Well, just because you didn't read at that, when you're like, hey, I have the bar set for like, I'm going to read for 10 minutes a day, every single day until I build this reading habit. Well, you know what? Some days you're going to be tired. Some days you're going to not want to do it at all. And I encourage rest, because rest is what's required in order for you to be productive, right? Rest is the required. You can't be productive. Like you got to have gas in order for the car to go. If you don't have any gas, it don't matter what you're not going to be productive, right? So the way you get gas is like to recover, you recharge your batteries is you have to rest. And so all that to be said, on those days that you don't have a whole lot of energy though, you might have had your rest, whatever, and you're still tired. Hey, read one page. Do the smallest thing possible, right? The smallest version of whatever that is, right? Whether that's reading a sentence, reading a page, reading 5 pages, whatever that is for you at whatever stage you're at. You don't think that to this day that I have days like that? Absolutely, man. And I have a little girl too, and life is always going to throw things at you, and challenge you. And so it's really about like just having that system put in place. Like, hey, this is the bad days system. Like, okay, on the bad days, what are my options? Oh, I can listen to an audiobook. I can read one page. I can read two. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is you're trying to maintain that identity of being the reader, being the learner. And by doing that, it's going to be much easier for you to sustain or to keep that habit going, right? So that's the thing is right. You want to anchor reading to a routine, not your specific mood. And that I talk about this. I think I talked about it last stream, maybe the stream before. It's like, hey, some people like the optimal time to read is not going to be in the evening time after work. Sometimes it might be first thing in the morning. Like you get up in the morning, that's a part of your routine. Like you maybe right now you just need to get up 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and go like work out in the garage or go to the gym and listen to an audiobook while you're at the gym. Hey, if that's where you're at with your as far as building your reading habit, I applaud you for that because you know what? That's you're doing more than a lot of other people are doing. Um, a lot of other people are just like sleeping to the last minute, snoozing their alarm, racing out of bed to get to work, or they got not like getting up early and working on like that. You're pairing that with something like other habits, like find what's going to work best for you in your routine. And eventually you get to that point to where you can, and again, it goes back to like so maybe you just want to read during your lunch break. Like you're going to go out on your lunch break and sit in your car, or you're going to go to a certain spot and you're going to read your book. And that's just like a ritual that you have. But you don't want to necessarily pair it with your mood, I would say, because motivation is going to wane. You're going to have good days and bad days, but just have that system put in place for those low energy days. And again, click around on some of the other videos on this channel to help kind of with any of the, if you need any help with certain systems to be put in place, depending on where you are in your reading journey. Okay, let's move on to the next. External comparison focus. So evaluating progress based on others' output, right? So maybe you have a buddy, or maybe you've seen the YouTubers, or you're on social media, or you see on Reddit, people are reading all these books. And basically what this just distracts. Uh, this is just a distraction. You should base your stuff, measure it on clarity and understanding over how many books you read, right? So, again, going back to what I said earlier, like it's not about reading 50 books a year. It's about how much progress you make with your reading habit or your understanding of whatever topic that you're moving on to. And so, don't get caught up in the comparison game. That applies in various different aspects of your life, but in reading is the same. Like it's who cares? Like, of course, people are going to tell you, you're going to see stuff like social media is terrible for this. Is like, you see all these successful people. They're like, yeah, I read this many books this year. It's like, who cares? Like, ultimately, it's like, focus on where you're at. Like, of course, you want to have like a North Star, but set your own goals and measure based off of, like how much you understand and less on the output. Because at the end of the day, you might read, you might read I've set goals. I'm sorry. I'm getting distracted over here because Emmy's like walking around and they're just my other dog is up front, kind of pacing back and forth. Hopefully, you guys can't hear the pitter patter on my hardwood floor, like the dog's just walking up and around the house. Um, but yeah, the whole motivation thing, or not motivation, sorry, the external comparison focus is just like when you compare yourself to others, you'll see people online that are saying these things. It's like just focus on yourself, and a lot of times just don't even look at that stuff, man. You set a good goal and you're only focusing on your goal. That's the thing, man. With social media, it's like it's an outlet that, and this is just my personal opinion on it. Like it's an outlet to kind of escape reality, but ultimately, it's like it's not healthy because all you're seeing is like the best version of whatever on there. And you're not it's not like an accurate depiction of reality. And it can really weigh on your mental health. So I say to eliminate that distraction, you just try to minimize the amount of social media usage that you use. And also just, measure, you based off of your understanding. Don't worry about number of books. Like who cares? Um, and because again, at the end of the day, if you only read, let's say you don't even have a reading habit, but you read 2 books this year, hey, that's 2 more books than you read last year or the year before. And so that's progress, right? And and so again, don't get caught up in the comparison game. I know I did. I thought I should, because I see all these people like, you need to read this book and this book. And then, like, hey, if you want to be successful, then just focus on reading 40 books every year, year over year. And that compounding effect is going to be, oops, just hit my mouse. Sorry. I'm over here just swinging my hands around. And this is dangerous. I'm about to knock my monitor off the desk. But the comparison game is dangerous because it's just going to lead you to it's going to make you feel bad about yourself when you don't need to. And I don't, it's not necessary. Don't worry about what other people are doing. You just worry about you. And you'll find that you'll be much happier too when you stop worrying about the opinions of others or what they're doing. Oh, this is a huge one. Short-term expectation bias. So expecting immediate results from reading. Learning develops through accumulation over time. And so you want to focus on repetition and long-term consistency, not like, again, this isn't the fun thing to say. This isn't the thing that gets the clicks or gets the views. But it's like, it is the best medicine because it's like learning is not, if you're learning a new skill, there's a good book. I have it right here. Yeah. This is a good book. And I like to talk about this book whenever I, regardless of your opinions on self-help, it is a good book. It's an easy read. I recommend anybody read it at some point in their life. But it says a little book that teaches you when to quit and when to stick. And basically I'll give you the short version is like life always has this dip right here. And this is where you might be right now and it might feel pretty good. But you're going to hit the dip. And all things worth doing in life are on the other side of the dip. And you're going to go through that dip. Doesn't matter. You might make some progress right now. You might be feeling good, but eventually you're going to have to go through that dip. And, that short-term expectation bias is like, oh yeah, I'm just going to be able to get all these different things. It's going to unlock everything. And you're better off focusing on just that system and long-term consistency. And this is just what, like, for me, what's helped too is like try to do. I won't go into it in this video. Is like having the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. But like when you have the growth mindset, you put on the hat of being the learner, and so it makes everything else in life like way less serious and rigid because everything's an experiment. And then also like, of course, so that's for your failure piece, but like also that like I still have a lot to learn. And because I have a lot to learn, that means that there's the possibilities are endless and that there's more opportunity that just because this short-term little thing, like I might learn something, but there's still even more to that, right? There's more things that I'm still going to learn. And it's better about figuring out what's going to be allow long-term consistency. Because again, I thought that, man, I thought I'd read these self-help books and my life's just magically going to change. Reality twist or plot twist, it doesn't really change unless you actually apply what you are learning. And then some of these books, like, yeah, there is some merit to those the arguments of like, oh yeah, self-help is just like regurgitated stuff from the classics. Like, okay, got it. Read the philosophers. Understand it at first principles. That's good. But what I'm getting at is like, yeah, don't think that just because you like you're gonna those little life is gonna be as simple as like, hey, I'm gonna read like one or two books and it's gonna magically change my life because a lot of times it doesn't end up being the case. And I don't mean to turn anybody off. I mean, that's probably again, like I said, that's the thing that's gonna get the clicks. Because everybody wants, easy and safe. But it's not always going to be the case. Of course, there are some things that you can do. That's what makes the good books, right? So how to win friends and influence people. Like you apply some of those things from those books. Like, hey, there is some things that you can immediately impact your life, but You have to sustain that over the long haul before that becomes it. Like that is just communication strategy. And until you do those things enough times where they become a habit, you don't really, it doesn't become a part of your character. See, and again, I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but hey, we're on a live stream and what are live streams for, right? Not to waste your time, but just hopefully this will be beneficial. I think of you yourself as kind of like a video game character, right? And there is no, the thing is like if you've ever put cheat codes into a game, let's say like for example, back in the day, for any of my people, any, geez, that just scared me. She just sneezed. When you put cheat codes in for Pokemon back in the day, and you got everything that you wanted, like infinite rare candies or whatever, how satisfying was it? Probably for me, I would tell you my experience, it wasn't very satisfying. And so, those Pokemon are kind of like different characters that you level up and they get their various different move sets and stuff like that. And so I think about myself kind of like a character too in this life. And so there's various different things that I can read, that I can do that are going to help level up my character. And you can think about yourself kind of like software, right? So right now I'm version, 1.2, version 1.2, Tyler, and now I'm due for a software update. And how do I do that? Well, I got to read this book and this book. I got to make get rid of some of these bad habits in my life. And then I'll be at version 1.3, or I'll be at like a full 2.0 upgrade. So what I'm getting at is like, life is a lot of times about that. And so why I use the Pokemon example and then the character example is because like, first of all, nothing good in life worth having ever came like super easy and in an instant. I just my opinion, because just from my experience with that, right? It's about the journey. It's not about once you get to the destination, a lot of times you're like, man, that's how I realized it. Like level 100 Pokemon, everyone in my party, and I just destroy everybody in the game. But like, what fun was that? There was no challenge. So a lot of times life's about the journey. And then the second thing with that is, so with that, you're everything's about like leveling yourself up certain areas of your life. Whether in its various different character traits, characteristics that you have. And that doesn't come immediately. It requires habit changes and all these different things and different skills that you have to learn. So short-term expectation bias, again, I've struggled with it. And hey, I still struggle with it sometimes. I'm like, hey, I have a certain problem in my life and wait, we want it solved right now. Like, sure. And that's why people spend lots of money to have their problem solved quickly. But sometimes in life, it's just like, it's about going through, you got to go through the dip first, in order to get to the other side. So just something to think about. Let's move on to the next point. We're here at like an hour and a half. And I don't want to go too late for you all, for anyone that's been watching. I don't want to be too long-winded. I think I spelled that right. I did it quickly. Effort misinterpretation. So assume effort alone guarantees improvement. Now this is, I heard this a lot whenever, this is something that I just want to, I say this, it was a mistake that I made, but I also want to like caveat with it kind of depends on where you are at in your reading journey. Because I think, hey, stepping up to the plate and swinging, is like swinging the bat and practicing is good. At least you're stepping up to the plate, because you're not, I don't want you to put yourself in, analysis paralysis with this. Right. But when it comes to effort, it's like, I think was it Bruce Lee that said, if you practice the wrong kick, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And so like you practice a kick that's done the wrong way. Basically ineffective methods can still feel productive. So basically what you need feedback. This is what I'm saying is like effort misinterpretation means like, even though you're putting forth effort, it doesn't always guarantee that you're going to improve. So you want to evaluate what you're doing, right? It is a feedback loop. right? This, I'll give you an example for my note-taking method that I do for like taking notes, right? I was like taking these long, long pages and pages of notes. And I'm like, yeah, this is great. Like, this is important. Like, I'm actually learning and I'm taking these notes. So the knowledge must just be like ingraining in my head. Wrong. I never went back to look at those notes because they were too long. They were overwhelming to look at. And it just wasn't effective. And so then I was like, okay, well, then maybe I'll just like I'll type out my notes in Obsidian and just do like bullet points. Tried that, not effective. Then I was like, okay, well, let me just, I read the book, Make It Stick. And then I was like, okay, how can I simplify this? Like to the bare minimum. And so that's where I came up with my 3-2-1 method, like three key ideas, two questions that I have. It was a combination of reading Make It Stick and then reading this book right here, How to Read a Book, sort of like to have a conversation with the author. And then one thing that I can take action on the next 24, 48 hours. And then there's some other nuance in there, like when it comes to like asking those questions as I'm reading and underlining certain things. And again, I've made more videos on this specific topic, but what I'm getting at here is like, that is evaluating my process. Because if I would have just stepped taking notes the same way that I was doing, ultimately it would have led me to burning out because I was starting to get to the point of where it started to feel like school. I was taking all these notes and I felt like the only time I could sit down and read was whenever I was if I was just willing to sit there and take massive amounts of notes. And so again, just you need feedback. But it also it's like just get started. And this is why it's just like I've just wanted to err on the side of caution whenever I say this to someone because if you're anything like me, I've had a tendency to overthink and I still overthink things to this day sometimes. And so I'm just saying that it's like don't overthink it, get started. And then as you start, once you start getting that ball rolling, now let's okay, how can we refine things? How can we improve them little by little? What's get some of the feedback and then just go from there. And evaluate whether your approach is actually working. So that is the effort misinterpretation. Because again, the whole thing was like taking notes, man. That sucked. And I was ultimately about to get to the point where I did a lot of times I just wouldn't read. I go weeks without reading. I'm like, okay, how can we make this more simple? And how can we make it sustainable? And again, there's other ways that I have with mind maps that I'm doing now that make it even more simple. It's something that I'm kind of, oh, that just scared me to death. She just stepped on, she just stepped on my daughter's little, one of her toys that are sitting in here on the floor. And I just heard voices. You guys just witnessed that. Oh man. Okay. Is this the last one? We'll see. Maybe another one will pop up in my head. This is 20 though. Yeah. Okay. Absence of a learning system. All right. So there's no structured process for turning reading into understanding. Without structure, learning becomes it becomes inconsistent and fragmented. And so, I mean, that's what this whole channel has kind of been dedicated to is like, um, it's more like a reading system, but it goes hand in hand with like a learning system. And I talked about it was like two streams ago. I won't go into my whole Miles framework, but I covered this entire learning system. And not this past stream, but the stream before that. So 2 videos ago. And I talk about the entire framework, but it just ultimately starts with like reading, understanding, recalling, applying, and then repeating. That's the feedback loop. Hey, Amy. We're almost done, girl. I think we're almost done. And I know you've been patient. She said, I'm just trying to chew every piece of paper in this office or piece of cardboard or stepping on toys that you're trying to say hey to everybody. For sure. The AirTag is a little bit overkill. My mom decided to get her the AirTag for it, and she's just like, she's a worrywart. I mean, I guess it's a good use of an AirTag. But anyways, yeah. So not having a learning system, so first you want to read, you want to understand, try to understand what the author is trying to say. Like, what are the problems that are being presented? What's the book about? What are the problems that the author is presenting? What are the solutions, and why does it matter? And then you want to try to recall what the key ideas were. So using my 3-2-1 method. And then after you close the book and you try to recall using the 3-2-1 method, and then you want to try to go out and apply that one thing that you're going to apply that you've learned. And then you want to repeat that over and over again. And that's kind of that feedback thing until you finish the book. And what happens is like reading goes from like just being this process of trying to like start at page one and make it to page whatever is in the book, and it becomes more of a journey. And it's like it's a system versus, and that's I know duh, it's a system. You're taking reading from being just this thing to where you learned in school. And okay, that just scared me to death again. I guess the machine just turned off. Man, there's a lot of I hope this was this stream wasn't an absolute disaster. Maybe it was a little bit entertaining. But yeah, just having a system for yourself versus just opening a book and looking at the words and figuring out what they mean. And again, this comes over time, and it's again going back to my last point about like evaluating your approach and doing things that actually work with your brain and not against it, and putting a whole bunch of pressure on yourself. But having a learning system is essential. Now, um, again, this was a lot of mistakes. And I'll say that for those of you that made it to the very end, I love you guys. Like this is a long stream. And I appreciate you hanging out and drop what's the word? That we want to drop for those of you that made it to the end. So I know you made it to the end. Uh just drop OG down in the chat, or drop it down in the comments if you made it all the way to the end. And that way I know you made it to the end. But I appreciate you all, and know that this is a journey. And not to put a whole bunch of pressure on yourself. If you tuned into the stream late, go back and watch. Hopefully, um, the stuff that I dropped in here was helpful for you all. Again, I'm open to any of your feedback, more videos, types of videos that you want to see. Um, I think we're going to I have some cool plans here for the next 12 weeks. So stay tuned for that. I'm trying to maybe do this live stream thing once a week. It really just depends on you all's feedback. And yeah, so I'm open to, again, if watching on the replay, let me know any mistakes that you've made as a reader. And yeah, that's all I got, guys. Keep learning, keep growing, keep going, and I'll see you in the next one.